What if JFK was killed because he got too close to the truth? A burned memo hints that shadowy government officials, possibly tied to UFO secrets, wanted him silenced. Mixed in secret calls from Australia and wild CIA plots to kill Castro, and suddenly the JFK story looks a lot darker than we were told. These are dark secrets leaked from declassified JFK files. First up is the Burned Memo. Now, to discuss this, we'll have to talk about a group called Majestic 12. What is Majestic 12, or MJ12, though? Well, they're said to be a covert committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials tasked with handling everything related to UFOs. Some claim they've recovered alien craft, performed autopsies on extraterrestrials, and even worked alongside them. According to some conspiracy theorists, President Kennedy found out about MJ12's existence and didn't agree with the secrecy. He wanted to disclose the truth about UFOs to the public. Others believe he was trying to collaborate with the Soviet Union on space exploration, meaning he'd have to share classified UFO information with them. MJ12 reportedly didn't want that. The Burned Memo, which surfaced in the 90s, is often used to support this theory. The document appeared to be partially charred, like someone tried to destroy it. It's allegedly written by a high-ranking MJ12 member and refers to Lancer, which was JFK's Secret Service codename. The memo says Lancer is, quote, asking too many questions and that it cannot be allowed to happen. To add to that, Kennedy sent a memo to the CIA just 10 days before his death, requesting access to UFO intelligence. He also gave a speech at the UN in 1963, pushing for joint space efforts with the Soviets, and some believe MJ12 saw him as a threat and had him silenced. In 1968, Australia's top spy asked the CIA to keep quiet about an investigation into phone calls made to the US Embassy in Canberra, calls that mentioned a plot to kill President John F. Kennedy. Now, wait till you hear what this Australian spy's name was. It was Sir Charles Spry. That sounds like something he made up on the spot when he was being questioned during one of his missions. Like, excuse me, sir, what's your name? Are you a spy? What? No, I'm not. My name is Sir Charles Spry. Anyway, this request, which was revealed in newly declassified files, was part of a memo exchange between Sir Charles and CIA Director Richard Helms. The investigation centered around anonymous calls placed both before and after JFK was killed. A memo from CIA officer William E. Nelson stated, "Sir Charles's letter to you recommends against declassification of the Warren Commission document CD 971, which refers to our investigation of anonymous telephone calls." Helms replied, "There is not, at the present time, any intention to release CD 971. The point made by you in your letter provide every reason to keep the document out of public domain." CD 971 was eventually declassified in 1976, but key parts of Sir Charles's letter were kept secret for nearly 60 years. The full, unredacted version wasn't released until 2023. In the letter, Sir Charles warned it, quote, had never been officially stated that there is a CIA Canberra station or that there are CIA officers in Australia, going on to write that releasing that info could lead to uncomfortable questions in Parliament and the press. Just goes to show how far agencies went to protect classified operations, even ones tied to JFK's death. Declassified documents show the CIA made several serious attempts to eliminate Fidel Castro. These were detailed plans backed by real money and resources. Early on, the agency even brought in mobsters like Sam Giancana, figuring organized crime had the reach and muscle to get the job done in Cuba, especially with their past ties to Havana's casino scene. The tactics ranged from classic spycraft to completely off the wall. One plan involved slipping Castro a poison pill. That's pretty normal. Another idea was a cigar rigged to explode in his face. That's a little nuttier. And one involved a scuba diving suit coated with a toxic fungus and bacteria designed to slowly infect him. They also brainstormed this booby-trapped seashell that would detonate when picked up. Because Castro liked to dive, They figured he might grab it while underwater. Definitely a stretch. The CIA spent time and money developing these tools, labs were involved, materials were tested, some plots made it right up to the delivery phase. Each attempt failed for one reason or another, but the paper trail is undeniable. Government officials had signed off on plans to quietly remove a foreign leader during peacetime, with no war declared, no real public debate. It all happened in the shadows. Now, there's no solid proof that JFK directly ordered or approved these specific plans, but they were run through covert programs like Operation Mongoose, which was overseen by JFK's brother, Robert F. Kennedy, as Attorney General. So while JFK may not have micromanaged the day-to-day dirty work, he did know the US was trying to get rid of Castro by any means necessary. Operation Northwoods was a formal proposal from the US military's top brass in 1962. The plan was to stage fake attacks on American soil and then blame them on Cuba. The documents lay out ideas like blowing up a US ship, faking a commercial airliner being shot down, and planting explosives in American cities. They even considered staging funerals for fake victims to stir public outrage. The goal was to build enough support to justify going to war with Cuba, and this wasn't hidden in some conspiracy book. It's in official declassified Pentagon documents. The plan was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and sent to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Then President Kennedy shut it down. He didn't let it go any further, but the fact that this made it across his desk in the first place says a lot. Some very important people in the US military were ready to kill Americans or stage deaths just to enter into a war. This has to be one of the most disturbing cases in the history of US politics, showing just how far they were willing to go during the Cold War. After Kennedy was killed, a lot of people assumed Lee Harvey Oswald was just a lone drifter. But declassified files tell a different story. The CIA had been keeping tabs on Oswald for a while, long before the incident. They knew about his defection to the Soviet Union in 1959, they knew he came back, and in 1963, just weeks before JFK's death, Oswald showed up in Mexico City trying to get a visa to Cuba and the USSR. The CIA was watching that trip closely. They had wiretaps on the embassies, they had photos, but a lot of what they knew didn't get past to the FBI or Secret Service. That failure to share intel wasn't just a slip-up. Later investigations, including those by the Church Committee and the House Select Committee, found that the CIA withheld important information. They sat on files that could have raised red flags. For example, the CIA didn't tell other agencies that Oswald had been in contact with known Soviet and Cuban operatives. They also didn't mention that surveillance photos and transcripts from Mexico City that might have painted a bigger picture. Why keep that information quiet? That's still debated. Some think it was just the usual government siloing, agencies not really talking to each other. Others believe the CIA was trying to cover its own tracks. Maybe they didn't want anyone to know how closely they were spying on foreign embassies in Mexico City. Either way, it left gaps that, if filled in time, might have changed everything. Declassified files show that while JFK was in office, the US, mainly the CIA, helped push out foreign leaders when things weren't going the way Washington wanted. In South Vietnam, for example, the US had backed President Diem for years, but once he started ignoring American advice and cracking down hard on protests, the CIA gave the go-ahead to South Vietnamese generals, and a coup followed. Diem was killed shortly after. Something similar happened in the Dominican Republic. The US had wanted dictator Rafael Trujillo gone for a while. Eventually, the CIA gave weapons and backup to local rebels who were planning to take him out, and they did. This was a pattern. If a leader overseas started getting in the way of US goals, the government would step in quietly and try to swap them out. We already talked about how they failed with Castro. Now again, JFK wasn't running the show on every detail, but he was in the loop. Sometimes these plans were talked about in meetings, other times the CIA just handled it and kept the updates a bit vague. The bottom line though, is that the US was messing around in other countries' politics, and if someone had to be removed to keep things in line, they had people ready to make that happen. During JFK's presidency, the CIA was running MK Ultra, a classified program focused on mind control. They used substances substances like LSD, performed hypnosis, and sensory deprivation, all to see if they could manipulate people's thoughts and behavior. A lot of the test subjects were prisoners or mental patients, but some were also just regular people. Almost none of them knew what they were being given or why. A lot of the work was hidden behind fake organizations and university studies. That way, the paper trail didn't lead back to the CIA. The agency wanted to understand how to break someone down mentally, whether for interrogation, manipulation, or something else. The logic was that if foreign governments were researching this kind of thing, the US had to stay ahead. The program started in the early 50s and was still active in the 60s, which means it was running during Kennedy's time in office. There's no hard evidence showing JFK was personally involved or fully informed, but MK Ultra operated under the broader umbrella of Cold War intelligence work, which the president would have been briefed on in general terms. Most of what we know now comes from documents released years later, but even still, a lot of the files were destroyed in the 70s, which means there was most likely even worse stuff going on that we'll never find out about. During the 60s, the FBI, under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover, launched a full-scale campaign to monitor, discredit, and harass Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders. They wiretapped phones, they bugged hotel rooms, followed activists around, and collected personal information, all without proper legal oversight. Hoover viewed King as a potential threat, claiming he had communist ties, even though there was never any solid proof of that. One of the most disturbing things to come out of this campaign was a letter sent to King anonymously, now confirmed to have come from the FBI. The letter tried to push him into stepping away from the movement. In fact, they even urged him to take his own life, or else they'd expose personal details about him. It was blackmail, plain and simple. It was part of a government-backed program called COINTELPRO, designed to disrupt groups the FBI considered a problem. Civil rights organizations were high on that list. King wasn't the only target. Others like Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, and even just regular people involved in various different protests were tracked and harassed. Years later, the government admitted what had happened, but during the Cold War, none of this was made public. Operation Mockingbird was the CIA's effort to influence the media. During the Cold War, they built connections with reporters, editors, and media companies, people who could help shape the stories the public saw. Some of these journalists were fully aware they were working with the CIA. Others were just getting tips and leads from people that they didn't know were tied to intelligence. Either way, the goal was to control the narrative. The CIA helped plant stories, push certain angles, and use journalists to gather intel while pretending to just be reporting. It all came out in the 70s during a congressional investigation called the Church Committee. That's when people started learning just how deep this thing went. They found out that the CIA had ties to dozens of journalists and, in some cases, whole news organizations. The agency later claimed that they shut it down, but a lot of people aren't convinced. The problem is, once the government admits that it used to influence the news, people start to wonder if they ever really stopped. Long before anyone heard the name Edward Snowden, the US government was already collecting information on its own citizens. One of the biggest examples was also Project Shamrock. It started right after World War II and ran for decades. Under this program, the NSA teamed up with major telegraph companies to copy and review messages going in and out of the country. That included messages sent by Americans, business stuff, personal stuff, anything. There were no warrants, no court oversight, just bulk data collection, all in the name of national security. And it wasn't just Shamrock. There were other programs too, like Project Minaret, which specifically targeted certain people the government saw as threats: activists, journalists, certain US senators. This, of course, wasn't public knowledge at the time. Again, this came out during the Church Committee hearings when Congress finally started digging in to what the intelligence community had been doing behind closed doors. What they found shocked a lot of people. Agencies had basically built a system to spy on Americans without telling anyone. Not the courts, not Congress, and certainly not the public. Stuff like this is why so many people have such a hard time trusting the government to this day. The only difference now is that the tools have gotten way more advanced. Back then it was telegrams. Today it's phones, email, just everything in between. With all that said though, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.